Hi everyone, my name is Paul Muller, founder and CEO of Vision Retirement, and today I'm joined by Ben Stark, wealth advisor and director of client experience. How you doing today, Ben?
Doing great, Paul. How about yourself?
Excellent.
Glad to hear.
Yep, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely.
We're going to be talking about the role of Roth IRAs in retirement planning and some housekeeping here. We're going to take probably about 30 minutes. We're going to try to cram a lot into a short time, but we have an opportunity to continue the conversations afterwards. And also, we will take questions as they come in. Feel free to type your questions in the Q&A bar, and we'll go ahead and answer them as they come in today. Sound like a plan?
Sounds great.
Awesome. Excited to talk about Roth IRAs. And before we do, just a little bit about us. We are a registered investment advisor located in Ridgewood, New Jersey. We started in 2006 to help people better prepare for retirement and feel more comfortable about and confident in the decision-making process around the decisions people make. Roth IRAs happens to be one of them, so we'll go ahead and get started. And let's talk a little bit about the basics of Roth IRAs, Ben. There's a lot of information out there, and we're going to go through this and try to be as clear and concise in the next 30 minutes. So why don't you talk to us a little bit today about the basics of Roth IRAs?
Sounds great. So I think most folks are familiar with traditional IRAs where the money will go in on a pre-tax basis, meaning you get a tax deduction today, the money grows tax deferred, and then when you take it out, you pay taxes on it in retirement. A Roth IRA is the opposite of that, where the money that you put into the account, you pay taxes on it as it goes in, the money grows tax deferred, but when you take it out in your retirement years, you actually don't pay any taxes at that point. So it's the complete opposite of a traditional IRA, which is definitely a very interesting feature. Contributions that you put in, so your principal dollars, if you put in $5,000, let's say, you could take that dollar amount out at any time for any reason. The earnings have some restrictions around them. Typically, they need to be in the account for at least 5 years or until you're 59 and a half, whichever is later. Otherwise, you can be imposed a early withdrawal penalty.
Right. And there are some misconceptions about Roth IRAs because I think as tax laws have changed and some of the rules around IRAs have changed, it used to be that Roth IRAs were really meant or thought of for younger people, right? And I think one of the reasons is what you just touched on is that, if you put money into a Roth IRA and you do it for, say, 10 years, right? And the, let's just say it's $6,500, and after 10 years I put in $65,000. What you said was you can get back your contributions for any reason, no penalty, no taxes, right?
Right.
So it almost makes a great savings vehicle as well for younger people that may not have, had the ability to save a lot, outside of retirement accounts. But that's sort of changing, right? I mean, we're sort of seeing the evolution of Roth IRAs. We're seeing tax laws change, and we're seeing new strategies. So the conventional thinking that had always been centered around Roth IRAs is a little bit different today, right?
Yep.
And, we can talk more about some of the strategies, but, let's just for 1 second, tell me about some ideas around the contribution rules, that will help us, think, more long-term about Roth IRAs.
Sounds good. So for folks who are looking to contribute to a Roth IRA, it's the same rule for a traditional IRA as well. The current 2023 year limit is $6,500 per year, or an additional $1,000, a total of $7,500 per year if you're the age of 50 or older. It has to be considered, your contributions have to come from compensation or earned income. So anything that you've been actively working for, which for most folks comes from your W-2, it could from a 1099 or a few other sources. There's no age limit or age restrictions to put the money into the Roth IRA, which I think is a nice feature to folks, especially if they wanted to do something in their later years in life. And what's also nice about it is similar to a traditional IRA as well, Paul, is that spouses who might not be working can also contribute into a Roth IRA as long as their working spouse has the earned income to be able to contribute for them. So definitely some nice features. There are, of course, if you look on the screen, there's a couple of limitations here. Unlike traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, whether or not you're covered by an employer plan like a 401k or 403b or some sort of plan, there is a hard income cap on your modified adjusted gross income. So those numbers are on the screen for you to take a look at so you can understand how those rules work. But beyond that point, if you make over that threshold for either an individual or a couple, you actually are not allowed to directly contribute to a Roth IRA, which I think leads us into our next point, Paul, about how do you get around that, right? So what is the alternative? And I think this is a great segue into that.
It is, and we'll talk about backdoor Roths. And, this was brought up in some recent legislation, and, we thought it was going to be taken out, where in fact it was taken out of the legislation. So, we think it's here to stay for quite some time.
Yep.
It's definitely a loophole. And, there are some people that, as you just said on your, prior comments, that, not everybody can contribute depending on their income. So, we have this thing called a backdoor Roth. You want to touch on sort of the strategy behind a backdoor Roth?
Yeah, absolutely. So a backdoor Roth, in essence, it really is a Roth IRA. You're just getting the money there in a more complex fashion, if you will. So instead of you contributing directly to a Roth IRA because your earned income is too high, you're above those limits that we just saw, instead you actually make an after-tax or non-deductible contribution into a traditional IRA. You then will immediately take those traditional IRA dollars that you just put in and just convert it to a Roth IRA. And you were always planning on paying the taxes anyway, since the contributions are not deductible or after tax. So for most folks, it makes a lot of sense. It's just you have to set up two accounts at once. You set up a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA. You put the money in the traditional IRA and then just move it over to the Roth IRA. And that's how a backdoor Roth IRA works.
Right. So just an extra step, but the same results. We're able to get the money into a Roth IRA still after tax, and those monies continue to grow tax deferred.
Yep.
One thing I do want to just comment on, because I think it's worth noting, is the spousal contributions that you talked about. I think it's one of the things that we're sort of overlooked, or seems to be overlooked a lot, when we talk about IRAs and Roth IRAs, is the ability for a non-working spouse to do that, and the same would be here as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what if that's not enough for me, Ben? What if I want to put a lot of money into a Roth IRA?
Oh, the mega.
And the mega, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the mega.
Yep. So a mega backdoor Roth IRA is for folks who have access through their employer-sponsored plans to an after-tax bucket of money. So most large employers, I think, offer this, Paul. And if you log right into your 401k portal or ask your HR department, it's pretty clear and obvious when you set up your contributions. You'll actually see three ways to contribute. You'll see pre-tax, Roth contributions, and a third bucket called after-tax. So the 2023 limit is $22,500 to contribute into a 401k with an additional $7,500 catch-up if you're 50 or older. But what I think a lot of folks don't necessarily know, realize, or understand is that the total contribution amount into a 401k plan is actually $66,000. And the reason why this number is much higher is because the IRS allows it for employees who oftentimes get a match or a profit sharing contribution. Because if it was just the $22,500, employers wouldn't be able to then also offer the match or profit sharing. So the IRS said, okay, we understand your employer wants to help you save for retirement. We're going to increase this number significantly to allow for those additional contributions. And if the sum of your matches and your own contributions are still not at the $66,000, then you can fill the gap with that after-tax bucket. So I think an example would probably be pretty helpful here, Paul. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think it would be great. And before we get to that, so the mega backdoor Roth is just going to be, a way for me to utilize my employer plan.
Yep.
A couple of things have to happen here is that one, they have to allow after-tax contributions, right? And then two, they have to allow in-service withdrawals at some point, right? In order for me to be able to withdraw those after-tax dollars to get them into a Roth IRA.
Yeah, and as far as I'm aware, Paul, I believe most plans that have an after-tax bucket typically will have a special provision that for after-tax dollars specifically, you should be able to roll them over whether or not you are 59 and a half.
Right.
So it's a good thing to check with your employer, but usually that they do allow for that.
Right. So we're going to talk, continue the conversation here about Roth conversions. one of the, when I talk to people about IRAs, it's always, how do I get money in and how do I get money out, right? So, there's different ways of getting monies into an IRA. We talked about contributions, taking money, from, your pocket basically and putting it into an IRA. And now we have conversions. We're talking about, the backdoor Roth where, we're converting a traditional IRA basically into a Roth IRA.
Right.
The mega backdoor, IRA, Roth IRA is, using the employer-sponsored plan. But let's talk a little bit about Roth conversions now as in general, since we talked about those two specific strategies. So, instead of contributing money, we can convert money to get it into a Roth IRA. So what are we talking about here with converting money as opposed to contributing?
Great question. So the main difference, Paul, as you alluded to, is that are contributions and conversions, right? So contributions are monies that you've earned and are putting into your Roth IRA through work or your Roth 401k or Roth IRA individually. A conversion is actually taking money that you've already set aside into a pre-tax account. And think of if you have a 401k plan that you've had for many years in a pre-tax bucket, and now all of a sudden you say, you know what, I feel like I'm in a lower tax bracket, or I'm willing to pay the taxes today to get them over into a Roth so I don't have to worry about them down the road. You would take that lump sum of money and take it from point A to point B, pay the taxes during that process, and then it would be in the Roth account forever, moving forward.
Mm-hmm. So, there was a point where, there was some limitations on converting from a traditional to a Roth.
Right.
But it seems to me that based on what you're saying, it's a lot simpler now, right?
Yeah, the IRS used to have a lot of restrictions, and I think they had their own sort of wake-up call and realized that a lot of folks were interested in this. And it is a great source of tax revenue for them. If folks are saying, hey, I want to convert a large sum of money, the IRS is like, great, we would love for you to do that, right? But it's a win-win for all parties, right? The IRS is able to collect on taxes that normally they would have had to maybe wait 30, 40, 50 years to collect upon. And then individuals are saying, you know what, I'm just going to take the tax bite today, knowing that I'm not going to have to, pay Uncle Sam my share down the road.
Right. And so just to summarize then, there's no income limit, there's no age limit. So basically anybody that wants to move money from a traditional IRA can convert that.
Yep.
And one of the things that, people will say to me at that point is, why I was always taught, to kick the can down the road, right? I don't want to pay taxes until I have to. So what you're telling me now is to take that money, convert it, pay the taxes, and do it that way? It doesn't make sense to me. So why do I want to pay taxes on monies that I had in a tax-deferred, tax-free, not tax-free, tax-deferred, bucket and pay taxes on those today?
Yeah, so I think really the compelling argument here is that we're in such a low tax rate environment. I mean, one of the lowest tax rate environments we've seen in our country's history. Mm-hmm. So for folks who, as you said, Paul, say, why would I ever want to accelerate my tax bill? Why would I want to pay more taxes in any given year versus slowly piecemealing it in my retirement years? Is that tax rates, because they're so low, are likely to probably go up, mm-hmm. right? So we already know at a minimum that the tax laws are going to sunset, and at the end of 2025, right? So there's a good chance that folks who think they might be paying a certain tax bracket today will likely be in a higher tax bracket, a few years from now.
So let's talk about that. You used the word sunset, tax code expiring in 2025. So what's going to happen? What are the scenarios that we could be looking at, in 2026?
Yeah, so with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that came out, in the start of 2018, these are the new tax laws that everyone is working with today. What will happen is that when the laws were passed, when 2026 starts, we're actually planned to revert back to the old tax code, which had higher tax rates and higher marginal brackets for folks too. The other alternative is Congress will come together and say, hey, we like some of what's today. We like some of what was back in 2017. Let's do a mix of the two. Tax rates will still be a little bit higher, but maybe not quite as high as they once were. So there's really three scenarios, right? The Congress will say, let's continue as they are today. We'll extend the sunset moving forward. We'll just let it sunset and revert back. Or the third, it'll be some sort of mix or new change altogether.
Okay. So there's a 66% chance, based on what you're saying, that taxes are going to be higher come in 2026 in the future. And that goes back to how we started today's presentation, is that when we look at Roth IRAs, they were really developed, or I won't say developed, the law was passed to really incent younger people to want to save for their own retirement, right? And we see people now in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, converting monies that they had once, gotten a tax deduction on to save,
Right.
paying those taxes because of where we're at in the tax code. Is that a fair assessment of what we're seeing?
Yeah, I think that is very fair. And, when we look at the actual tax rates we're in and the tax brackets, there's such a large area of wiggle room, if you will, for folks to convert or create additional income within those brackets, right? So if you're in a 22% bracket, I mean, you would need to incur, I think it's for a married couple, so it's almost $200,000 of income before being bumped into the next bracket. So being able to not only take advantage of a lower rate, but take advantage of a lower rate for much more income than what was, I think, ever traditionally allowed by the IRS is really very advantageous to folks to say, you know what, maybe putting some income on my balance sheet, on my tax return, actually makes a lot of sense, because I know I can make this stretch and work knowing that it's likely to be more compressed rates or higher rates, a few years from now.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about that case study that we alluded to earlier. We see these all the time, right? Where we meet with people, and it gets confusing when you start thinking about retirement income. And I think back to my grandfather, and he worked for the same company for 35 years, and he retired on his 65th birthday, pretty much. When he retired, he got his gold watch. Yep. And he had a pension, and he had Social Security, and a couple $1,000s in the bank. People didn't refinance mortgages because of, you bought a house, and let's say you bought a house at 30, it was paid off when you were 60. You worked until you were 65, and statistically you were dead at 72. That was sort of the world that we lived in, and so a lot of these strategies that we talk about today are pretty amazing, because everything continues to evolve. The more onus that we have on ourselves for providing retirement income, we have to start in making sure that we're maximizing all the dollars we have. So let's talk a little bit about the case study that we're going to show here.
All right. So let's take a look here. If you look on the screen, you'll see a bunch of blue bars and a graph, right? What this is a couple, they're 60 years old each, and they're going to be retiring soon. And what we're saying is, what is their current investment portfolio going to look like, and how long will it last for them throughout their years, right? So they have about $1.5–2 million of investable assets, and you'll see over time those blue bars, they tend to fluctuate, and they start declining over time because they're using those assets. A lot of those assets are pre-tax assets. So we start to see that acceleration in their later years, because they may not necessarily need the level of income, but with pre-tax accounts, you have to take required minimum distributions. So the IRS forces you, if you have to take out a certain amount every year, and even if you don't need it, you still have to take it out every year or pay a steep penalty.
Right.
So that's really what we're seeing with this case study here, and we're assuming a 6% rate of return over time on their investments.
Okay, so we met with the clients, and we start looking at different strategies and talk about some of the strategies or the strategy in this particular case of what we're going to be talking to the client about.
Well, based on the conversation we're having today, right? I think most folks can guess we're talking about Roth IRAs here, and Roth IRA conversions in this particular strategy. And we came back to the clients and said, hey, have you considered the Roth conversion? You have all of your retirement assets in pre-tax accounts, and we saw on the screen that those required distributions really start to erode their investment portfolio in their later years of life. So we said, hey, let's take a portion of that and slowly convert some of it year over year. So if you look on the screen now, you'll see that there are some gray bars there. The gray bars are showing that the taxes are being paid, right? So there is a net decline in their investment portfolio because when you convert, you have to pay taxes on that money. But it adds a lot of green in the tail end of their retirement years. And the reasoning for that is because now that more money is in a Roth IRA as a conversion, they are not subject to those required distributions that they originally were with their pre-tax account. And not only are they not subject to the required distributions, they no longer have to pay taxes on this money. So they can take a portion of their pre-tax and now tax-free from their Roth IRA to supplement their retirement income. So it's some pretty powerful stuff.
So just through the process of doing what I guess we would refer to as serial conversions, they were able to extend their assets for quite significantly.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously not everybody's scenario is the same, and this
Of
is
course.
one that we just recently touched on. But I guess the point being is that, we need to look and understand, how can we really maximize, a client's assets in order to provide the greatest amount of income, throughout their lifetime.
Right. Absolutely.
So there's been some changes. We've been through a lot of tax law changes over the past couple of years. Secure Acts, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act.
They have an acronym for everything these days.
There is, but there has been some changes, right? So we're talking about some of the positiveness of Roth IRA conversions, but in through some of these tax law changes, there's also been some restrictions that have been put on us, that cause us to sort of really think through it even more. You want to sort of talk about some of the recharacterization changes and what's taken place through some of the tax law changes?
Absolutely. So if anyone ever performed a Roth conversion prior to 2018, they would have known that if they did a conversion and at the, let's say they did it in June and then come December, they said, I got a big bonus, or my investments have really, they declined, and I really changed my mind. I don't like this Roth conversion this year. I want to undo it. You actually used to have the ability to undo, or the IRS called it recharacterize, and you could take the money back out of the conversion and put it back into your traditional IRA. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act has eliminated that. So folks now, that if they perform a Roth conversion at any point during the year, that's it. It's a done deal. There's no oops, there's no going back. So when folks are considering doing a Roth conversion, it's important to take into account different factors, maybe even waiting until toward the tail end of the year to consider doing it, so you know what your year's income looks like, and planning out in advance too, right? You want to make sure that when you make this decision that you're okay with it and it's in line with your plans and objectives.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing here with not being able to recharacterize is, we look at a year like last year, right? If you would have, done a Roth conversion in January, you got to the end of the year, and if you were invested in the stock market or even the bond market for that matter, you were ended up with less money at the end of the year than you did the beginning of the year, and you paid taxes on the higher amount. Right. So I think it's really important, as you said, to really think about the timing, because there are no more do-overs, and you are stuck with your decision at that time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I definitely think there's some questions here. So if you are considering doing a Roth conversion, or in this case, integrating it with your plan, it's important to think about knowing that there are no do-overs, right? So again, is it in line with your current objectives? Do you have plans to pay those taxes, right? If as soon as you do that conversion, you're getting a 1099 at the, come tax time, and the IRS is going to say, hey, you did this, you owe us some money here. So making sure that you have money set aside to pay those taxes, or you've actually directly withheld it from the conversion. So that's something really important as well. And again, it's also in key, like we looked at the case study, right? Do you have the expectation that by prepaying these taxes or accelerating these taxes, that there will actually be a net positive benefit for your overall financial plan? So you want to make sure that you're looking, not just for the immediate benefit this year, but what are the benefits going to look like 10, 15, 20 years from now? And if there's no net positive benefit or it's very negligible, it may actually not make sense. So that's why it's important to always take your time, ask yourself these questions, and work through the numbers.
Yep. And I think the second point you made about having the money to pay the taxes, we touched on it a little bit, but ideally, if you're going to convert monies from a traditional to a Roth, right? You want to have monies outside of the IRA to pay those taxes, right? So that we can maximize, that full conversion.
Yeah, definitely not the end of the world if you don't, but it is a big help if you're able. That way, more money can grow on a tax deferred and ultimately tax-free basis for you.
Yep. I know we're going to be having another webinar coming up talking specifically about the Secure Act.
Yes, we are.
But maybe we can talk about a couple of highlights here, that we're looking at.
Yep. So I think one of the biggest changes, which the IRS has already delayed, was that folks who were making more than $145,000 per year, if they were putting money into their catch-up bucket, right? So for folks 50 and older, those monies, folks had the choice. They could go into either pre-tax or Roth. Now the IRS has said that money has to go into a Roth bucket. They initially said it was going to take place January 1st of 2024. 401k providers said that's just not enough time for us to make the changes administratively and update all of our systems and software to integrate with the new laws. So the IRS said, okay, we understand, and they're going to delay that until 2026. But just know that it is coming, right? I think another big one as well is we talked a little bit before about employer contributions with matches. So now employers can provide the option to their employees that if you do get a match, it's traditionally always been on a pre-tax basis, and employers can now say, you know what, we can give you the choice to either take it on a pre-tax or as a Roth. So that could be a great option for a lot of folks here.
Awesome. And so there were also some other changes made, and one of the things that I really woke up and started understanding and got really sad when I understood it, they took away our stretch. We can't no longer, pass monies outside of to a next generation and have them take out the monies over their lifetime. Right. And I think from a planning aspect, it really makes us look at these other options a lot more closely, right? Because, we have a certain window. Why don't we talk a little bit about some of those changes that occurred through the tax law change?
Yeah, so with very few exceptions, right? Anyone now, if you inherit a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA too, you have to actually distribute the entire account balance within a 10-year window, right? So if I inherited, let's say from my grandma and grandpa today in 2023, $100,000 in a Roth IRA, by 2033, the end of that year, I have to take that full account balance completely out, whether I want to or not. Whereas you said, Paul, traditionally, folks could take little bits, little bites, year by year by year, based off their own life expectancy. And this has been such a profound change because I think now when it comes to estate planning, right, if you have a lot of money in a pre-tax account and give it to your children, if your children, let's say they're in their, mid to late 50s or early 60s during their peak earning years, and all of a sudden they inherit this large sum of money, and now they're making good money through their career, and now they have to cash out maybe $500,000. I mean, that could be a really big tax bill for folks, and families, I think, need to understand that Uncle Sam is very attached to that, right? So how do you prioritize and plan to keep more money within your family versus leaving it to the government?
Yeah, and it was interesting because I had a conversation with somebody this week, and they were an older couple, and they said, well, we would never consider converting our traditional IRAs to
Right.
to a Roth. And we got into the conversation about estate planning, and after we got into that conversation, the husband looked at me and he goes, wait a second. He goes, I don't pay that much in taxes, right? He basically, he was, older, not having a lot of income, and him and his wife, they're in their 80s, and they started talking about, maybe we should think about converting some money to a Roth because, I think their son was a doctor and their daughter was a lawyer, and they were both high earners, and they started looking at the erosion of taxes, since they could no longer stretch out their IRAs. So
Right.
I think it's important when we look at legacy planning and estate planning alike that this is definitely another option, that if somebody wants to maximize the amount of money that they're passing on to the next generation, that it needs to be at least a part of the conversation.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. So I know we're pack a lot into a small time. The purpose of today's presentation was to give some highlights and some overview. Right? It's always fun to talk about the details and the nitty gritty, but at least we wanted to give some high level thought in a short time period here. So we're here to help, right?
We are. Yep. So for folks who are thinking about implementing some of these strategies, or have never heard about these strategies and are now just thinking about it, we're here as a resource to provide guidance and support. These are things that we work on here at Vision Retirement pretty frequently. It's become really, I think, a hot topic for a lot of clients alike. So anyone with questions on their retirement planning, I think that brings us right into our offer for today.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, we talk to a lot of people on a regular basis, and I think, the burning desire for a lot of people is, they want to know, am I okay, right? Am I going to be okay? Am I on track, right?
Yeah.
We talk about a lot of different strategies, and, some are right for some people, some are not right for some other people. But the one thing that, all of our clients have and prospects have in common is that, people want to know, am I going to be okay?
Yeah.
Right? So we've come up with a solution for that.
Yeah, we have. So we offer 50% off of our Are You on Track service, which is really a comprehensive analysis of your existing financials. We'll take a look at your investments, do a risk analysis on that, provide you a scorecard of your finances and net worth, and also provide you with some income projections and tax projections throughout your retirement years. And I think that's really where a lot of folks have the most questions. Normally it's priced at $590, but again, we're offering 50% off. So just let us know that if you're interested, you were here on the webinar today, and of course we'll apply the discount to you.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing with this service that we're offering is just to give somebody peace of mind, knowing, right? I'm 55 years old. I just want to know, am I going to be okay?
Yep.
And so, that's why we offer this service, is, just to give, people more peace of mind and more confidence in knowing that, they're making the right decisions, leading up to the time that, they retire.
Absolutely.
So Ben, as always, thank you. We're going to continue to field questions here as they come in and answer those. So, but I do want to thank you for your time and your expertise.
Thank you, Paul.
And we look forward to the next presentation.
Great.
Thanks.
Same here.
Yep. Have a great day, everybody.
Yep. Have a great one.